Okay, so today we're going to be talking about multiplying decimals by decimals. So far we've only talked about multiplying decimals by whole numbers. So go ahead and add multiplying decimals by decimals to your table of contents page. This is Objective 5 NBT 7. So it's Objective 5 NBT 7 to your table of contents page. We're going to look at this word problem and go ahead and write cubes down the side to help us figure out what we need to do to solve this problem. I'm going to write it on this side because you can't see the other side. Alright, so it says Hunter's favorite peaches are $2.70 a pound at the local farmer's market. He bought 3 2/10 pounds of peaches. How much did he spend? So I'm going to circle my important numbers, $2.70, 3 2/10. And then I'm going to underline my question, how much did he spend? I'm going to box my action words, pounds, and then a pound. And then spend, and now I'm going to evaluate. If each pound is $2.70 and he bought 3 2/10 pounds, then I need to take the amount of pounds he bought, multiply it by the cost per pound, and then I'll figure out what my answer is. So when I evaluate, that means I need to multiply in this equation. So I'm going to take 3 2/10 and multiply it by 2 70/100 or $2.70. Now, this is different because I'm not just multiplying a whole number times a decimal number, but I have a decimal number here and a decimal number here. Both of my factors are decimal numbers, so that means my product is going to actually result in a decimal number as well. So I'm going to create a box, and I showed you something similar to this in class today. But I'm going to create a box just like I would if I were multiplying whole numbers and I wanted to do the box method, except this time I'm going to be using decimal numbers. Okay? So I know that on top I'm going to put my first factor, 3, and then right here is 2/10. Now the reason I do that is so that I'm reminded that this is a decimal. Instead of just writing 3.2, this reminds me that it's a decimal, not a whole number, so I don't get confused. Then here I'm going to do 2 wholes and I'm going to do 7/10. Now the reason I did that is because there's a 7 in the tenths place and a 0 right here doesn't change the value. Okay? So I'm going to do 2 wholes, 7/10. It's the same thing as 2 70/100. Okay, so when I look here, I'm multiplying 2 times 3 in this box. 2 times 3 is 6 wholes. Over here I'm multiplying 2 times 2/10. 2 times 2/10. Now there's a whole number times a decimal number, and we've learned how to do that. So 2 groups of 2/10 is equal to 4/10. How do I know that? Well, if I have 2/10 and then I have 2/10 again, that's 1, 2, 3, 4/10. Okay? And I just drew it out with place value blocks there. Or if I had a base 10 grid and I shaded in 2/10 2 times, I would see that I had 4/10. Then I have 3 times 7/10. Again, that's 3 groups of 7/10. Well, if I have 3 groups of 7/10, that's like 7/10 3 times. That would be 21/10. Okay? So 21/10 in word form is, or kind of semi-word form there, 21/10 is really equal to 2 wholes and 1/10. How do I know that? Because I know 10/10 equals 1 whole. If I had 7/10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I drew that 3 times, then I count all of those. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21/10. Okay? So if I have that, then it really equals 2 wholes and 1/10, because for every 10/10 it makes 1 whole. So for every 10/10 I have here, it makes 1 whole. So 21/10 is the same thing as 2 wholes and 1/10. All right, now right here I have 7/10 times 2/10. Now a lot of you might want to say, oh, that's equal to 14/10, but it's not. The reason it's not equal to 14/10 is because it actually creates hundredths. Okay? When I multiply a tenth by a tenth, it always equals hundredths. Always. Because think about it, I'm taking a tenth of, or several tenths of several tenths. That means it's going to be smaller than the hundredths because I'm multiplying by a decimal. And we learned that when you multiply by decimals, your product gets smaller than what you started with. Okay? So if I were to multiply a tenth by tenth and say that that's 14 tenths, our product would be bigger or larger than these two factors. Okay? Because 14 tenths really equals 1 whole and 4 tenths. And 1 whole and 4 tenths is larger than 7 tenths. It's larger than 2 tenths. But I know from what I've learned that when multiplying by decimals, my product always has to be smaller than the numbers I multiplied by. So the only thing smaller than tenths is hundredths. Or not the only thing, but one thing smaller than tenths is hundredths. So that's why multiplying a tenth by a tenth always equals in the hundredths place. So I know if I look at just the numbers there, 7 times 2 is 14, so that must mean it's 14 hundredths. Now I'm not done because I need to take all of these partial products and add them together. So I'm going to take 6 wholes. I'm going to add 0 and 4 tenths. I'm going to add 2 and 1 tenth, and I'm going to add 0 and 14 hundredths. I'm going to put my zeros in here, and then I'm going to add those together because those are all my partial products. So 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 4 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. So I get that 8 and 64 hundredths. When I look back at my question and ask how much did he spend? Well, he spent $8.64. Okay. Now let's take a look at another way to solve that same problem. Okay. This is one of the answer keys I wanted to show you. What they did is they set up the problem, drew an area model here. Okay. And what they did was they set up the problem with blocks. Okay. They drew 2 holes and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tenths. So that represents the 2 and 70 hundredths or 7 tenths. Okay. Down here they drew 1, 2, 3 holes and 1, 2 tenths, and they drew it going the other way. So this represents the 3 and 2 tenths. Okay. Then they filled in the spaces missing with the blocks that match. So here was a hole matched here. Well, here, since these are tenths, I had to put in tenths here. Okay, in each spot. I had to put in tenths here because that's what matched here. Okay, here, tenths matched to put in here because I had tenths matching here. Now, when I got here, I have tenths by tenths, so that means it creates these little blocks called hundredths, just like we discussed in our problem. And when I look at all those partial products, I have 6 wholes, I have 4 tenths, I have 2 and 1 tenth, and I have 14 hundredths, just like we noticed in our problem. Okay? So that's another picture way to see it. You might see some pictures represented like that on future work that we do where they've broken it down and they want to know what those numbers represent. Okay? All right, let's look at scenario 3. We're going to go ahead and do cubes down the side again. Anna's salad dressing label says there are 2 and 4 tenths servings in the package. If a serving size is 1 and 1/10 ounces, how many ounces are in the package? So I'm going to circle my important numbers, 2 and 4 tenths, 1 and 1/10. Underline my question, how many ounces are in the package? Box my keywords. So 2.4 servings, okay, and a serving size, one serving size is 1 and 1/10 ounces. So if one serving size is this much and there are this many servings, I need to multiply those two numbers to figure out the total amount in there. So there's 2 and 4/10 servings, and there's 1 and 1/10 in one serving. And I've got to figure out that answer. Okay. Now, in order to solve that, I'm going to set up my box again. And I'm going to write 2, and then over here I'm going to put 4 tenths. And then here I'm going to write 1, and over here I'm going to write 1/10. Now I have 1 times 2 in this box. That equals 2. Here I have 1 times 4/10. That equals 4/10 because anything times 1 equals the same thing. Here I have 2 times 1/10. If I have 2 groups of 1/10, that means I have 1/10 2 times. That means I have 2/10. And here I have 1/10 times 1/10, which always equals 100th. Okay, so 1 times 4 is 4. That means I have 4/100ths. Okay, that's my answer. Remember, it's because 1/10 times 1/10 has to be less than 1/10, because when we multiply decimals, it's always less than what I started with. So this is 0 and 4/100ths. Now I have to add those together. So I have 2 wholes plus 4/10 plus 2/10 plus 4/100ths. When I add all of that together, I get 4 here in the hundredths place, 6 in the tenths place, and 2 in the wholes. So that means there are 2 and 64/100th ounces in an entire package. Okay. Again, let's take a look at how that would be solved with kind of our example of a photograph. So if we look here, they have 1, 2 wholes and 1, 2, 3, 4/10, and they're multiplying that by 1/10, which is noted right here. Or excuse me, 1 whole and 1/10. This is 2 wholes and 4/10, just like we did with our numbers. Now they filled in this missing space. They said, oh, 1/10 fits right here because there's a 1/10 here and a hole here, so a 1/10 block fits that way. And they said, over here, since I have 1/10ths by 1/10ths, it must mean that 100ths fit right here because those are the blocks small enough to fit in here. And they get the same partial products that we did, 2 wholes, 4/10ths, 2/10ths, and 4/100ths. And you add all those partial products together, and you get the same answer that we got. Okay. Again, that's like a picture method to figure that out. All right. The next thing that I would like for us to look at is the homework page, or excuse me, the multiplying decimals by using an area model page. And I'm going to stick with using just the boxes with the numbers across the top versus using anything else. Okay, so I have 1 and 7/10 times 2 and 4/10. I'm going to break it apart into my box. I have 1 whole, I have 7/10. I have 2 wholes, I have 4/10. This is 2 times 1 equals 2. 2 times 7/10 equals 14/10, which really equals 1 whole and 4/10, because 10/10 makes another whole. 1 times 4/10 equals 4/10, and then 4/10 times 7/10. Remember, 1/10 times 1/10 always equals 100th. That is 0 and 28/100ths. Now I need to add all those together. I have 2 wholes plus 1 and 4/10 plus 0 and 4/10 plus 0 and 28/100ths. Have an 8 here. 4 and 4 is 8 plus 2 more is 10. Carry my 1. 1 and 2 is 3 plus 1 more is 4. So I get 4 wholes and 8/10 as my answer. Tomorrow, I want you to choose 2 more problems on this page right here to solve. Bring it in and show me. If you have at least tried to solve 2 more problems on this page, you can have 7 tickets. And if you can show it to me in your notebook, you can have 7 tickets. Okay? Save the homework page. We're going to use that in class later. And I will see you guys tomorrow.